Well, good evening. It's quite the powerful panel presentation we saw earlier with Kim Davis, quite a lot of conviction. This is the type of conviction we need from Americans around the country, those living in places far from D.C., to stand up and exercise their religious liberty as we fight the battles here from D.C. in terms of law and policy. So quite powerful and quite an example for us all. Our last panel is going to feature a number of other stories involving the exercise of individual rights, individual religious freedom. We're going to hear from a variety of individuals in different contexts, some in the military, some not in the military. At Family Research Council, we've grown increasingly concerned about religious liberty. Recently, we've seen attacks on individual believers increase in a variety of contexts, and we realize more and more we need the door to stay open, to have the freedom to exercise our faith and share our faith, even here in America, as we've long fought for it abroad. So at Family Research Council, we've started a website, freetobelieve.com. At freetobelieve.com, we're going to catalog stories of believers, ordinary people that we can share their lives through the online medium. You all can know what's going on with them, can know what happened in their lives, can take that information back to where you're from and share that with citizens. We need to build a grassroots movement of understanding that others are standing with conviction, like Kim Davis and the folks you're going to hear from on our panel tonight, in order to lay the groundwork and cultural understanding and acceptance for good law and policy that we're fighting for here in D.C. So this is our last panel to close out tonight, and we hope it'll give you food for thought as we continue to fight the battles for religious freedom here. So this time I'd like our panelists to come out and we'll proceed into our discussion. Please welcome our panelists. So we're going to proceed in a dynamic panel discussion tonight. I'm going to briefly introduce our panelists, allow them to share with you some of their story, or for the advocates like myself on the panel, some of what they've seen as they've advocated for individual religious freedom. You know, religious freedom is something that's grown quite controversial these days, and when we look at why it's controversial, it really seems to be in the areas of human sexuality, right? Religious freedom is never quite as controversial when it involves a claim involving some other factual context, someone who wants to wear certain garments or grow longer hair. A religious claim becomes controversial in the press and generates opposition when someone advances a view of saying, this is my belief, my religious belief on human sexuality. We see this most clearly in the recent battles of contraception and abortion and same-sex marriage. So some of the stories we're going to hear tonight involve these scenarios. Some don't. Some just involve the secular movement trying to push religion out of the public square, which we want to continue to highlight at Family Research Council and fight to make sure that does not happen either. So what I'm going to do is proceed in a fashion where I'll introduce briefly our panelists, allow them to share their story or their comments regarding the state of individual religious freedom in our country today, and then we'll proceed into some back and forth on this last panel this evening. So to start off, I want to highlight the case of Casey Davis, who's the third person down here. Casey Davis, also a clerk with the last name Davis from Kentucky, like Kim Davis, is involved in a similar scenario to that of Kim Davis. Casey Davis has had a situation placed at his doorstep that he did not go seeking. The Supreme Court, through a ruling inventing the right to same-sex marriage earlier this year, has imposed a regime that's now brought people like him to the forefront, forced them to take a stand for their beliefs or not. Casey Davis has taken a stand for marriage and refused to violate his conscience. So I'm going to allow him to briefly share his story now.
Thank you, Travis. I have been, last little bit, I've been joking with Kim back here and Joe. I've been called her son the last few days, and I'm not her son. We are brothers and sisters in Christ, through Christ. She's about 2 hours away from Casey County, but on June 26th there was a ruling that came that has troubled a lot of us since that day, and I was faced with a choice that had already been made before that day that I could not violate my conscience. I took an oath to do the job of county clerk to the best of my ability. So help me God. And my ability cannot go beyond what my conscience allows. It's never been able to, and it never will be able to. I rule my life on my convictions. I ask God to guide me in my life and the things that I do. And this is something that He has guided me to not do, because if He gave His life for me and all of you, the least that I can do is live mine for Him. And I think that in doing that, we have to do it on a daily basis. We have to petition God in our prayers. We have to ask God for guidance, and in that, He will come through, and He will show us what we need in our lives. He's that kind of God that doesn't leave us or forsake us. I've listened to a lot of talk here today at this summit, and I would say that I kept over and over again going to Haggai and the first chapter, the 6th verse. If you look at that, I think our country has come to the point to where that we're earning wages to put in a bag with holes. We have left God out of a lot of avenues that we should absolutely have Him in the forefront of. And we're $18 trillion in debt in this country. We need to turn back to God. We need to look to God for everything, every decision. And this is a decision that I'm going to stand by, and I'm going to hold true to. And I cannot waver. He didn't for me, and I'm not going to for Him.
Casey, I'd just like to ask you to tell us why it's so important for you to not check your beliefs at the door of your job. Why is it important for you to carry those beliefs into your role as a public employee, public official?
Well, I've been told over and over again that when I close the door to my office that I'm supposed to leave my personal beliefs out in the hallway. I can't do that. My personal beliefs is how that my life, how I run my life, how I've raised my family, and how I do my job. I was told by my governor that I needed to either lay my personal beliefs aside or do the honorable thing and resign. And my response back to him was simply this: it's a cotton-picking shame that we're electing people to office in this country and in the state of Kentucky that would tell our young people, our elected officials, us, that if we got to go by what we deeply believe, then we just need to quit what we're doing. I don't agree with that. Do you all? No. And I think it is a shame that we've got the leaders that our president is a shame what he's done to our country in the time that he's been there. And it's a shame that we have a governor in Kentucky that would tell me and the young people of his state that if they have to go on their values and their convictions, then they need to just resign and quit what they're doing. I don't believe that. I believe they need to listen to their beliefs, listen to their convictions, and listen to God before they listen to anybody in a black robe.
Thanks, Casey. We're going to come back for some more discussion later, but now I'm going to turn the discussion over to Mike Berry, who's seated second from me. Mike Berry is an attorney with Liberty Institute and one of our allies. He's a friend of mine. He's a former JAG in the Marine Corps, a skilled attorney who's been at the fore of fighting for these religious liberty issues in the military. So I'd like for Mike, why don't you briefly explain to the folks here what issues you've seen related to free to believe in the military, in your work, and in your advocacy.
Well, thanks, Travis. In the military, I never, having served as a Marine overseas in a combat zone, coming back to the United States, I never thought that I would see the day when someone like myself was needed, a position that I have, which is to defend and restore religious freedom in our military. But yet, 3 years removed from leaving active duty in the Marine Corps, here I sit as the Director of Military Affairs for an organization that's dedicated to defending and restoring religious freedom. And when I took this job at Liberty Institute, I thought that I would be working to defend our Constitution, defending Americans across this country whose religious freedoms were being taken away, but I never thought that it would be defending somebody in the military. And it was all somewhat providential that shortly after I joined Liberty Institute, we began to see a massive uptick in cases in our military. And one example is sitting to my left, and I'm not going to steal his thunder and tell a story, but Senior Master Sergeant Philip Monk certainly experienced his share of hard times in the military at the hands of our government. And another person who should really be up here with us is Navy Chaplain Wes Motter, who I have the privilege and honor of representing as well. And I know that Chaplain Motter would love to be able to be here himself to tell you his story. Unfortunately, he can't do that. But what I am pleased to share with you all is that Chaplain Motter is sitting here in the audience with you today, right here in the first row. And Chaplain Motter, will you please stand up? These two men put everything professionally on the line. Both had over 19 years of service in the military. Both risked all of that because of what they believe in and to do the right thing. And, two last points I want to make on this, Travis, is, first of all, there's a lot of misinformation out there about what rights we give up when we join the military, when we swear the oath of allegiance to our Constitution. We don't swear an oath to the President or to our commanding officer. We swear an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution of this nation. And second, we cannot forget why our military exists, which is to defend this nation. But I want to remind everybody that right on the heels of World War II, right, we had just declared victory in World War II, and our nation was facing a new threat, right, a threat different than what we had seen before, and it was a war of ideas. And President Truman actually commissioned a committee to do a study on the need, whether there was even a need to have chaplains in the military. What purpose did chaplains or religion serve in the military? And this committee submitted a report back to President Truman saying, our troops need to be ideologically prepared for battle every bit as much as they are physically prepared for battle, because we're in a war of ideas. And that's why it's so vitally important that we protect and enable our service members to be able to be ideologically prepared for battle. And that's part of our mission at Liberty Institute. So thank you for allowing me to share.
Thank you, and we'll come back to more of that shortly. For now, I'd like for Master Sergeant Monk to share his story of how he's been affected living out his faith in the military quite recently. So, Master Sergeant Monk, please share.
Sure. Through my experience, I've been so close to God. That's how I've been impacted by this. But I'd like to point out, in the military right now, there was a saying that says you can serve God and country, but never before, like it's going on right now, the men and women that are serving this great nation are asking themselves, do I serve God or country? If Chaplain Motter can't speak about biblical principles, what chance does airman, Marine, soldier have? His case has sent a chilling effect across our services. But I'll tell you what, he's been an example to me and to many others, because when you stand up and you fight back, you win. And I will just say this, you have to understand that when you sign up and you serve this great nation in our military, you basically are signing a blank check to old Uncle Sam. And it's payable. It's a blank check payable up to your life. Okay? And guess what? Uncle Sam has got no business coming between you and the great I am. When our servicemen and women, when they deploy overseas and they fight for their freedoms, when they come home, they deserve to be able to exercise the very freedoms they risk their lives for. Our men and women, when they report back to the base, they are not going to check God at the gate.
So I'd like to follow up with you just real quick, then we'll move on. But as you walk through what happened to you in the military, and you can feel free to share what you'd like to with that, how was your faith affected, and through your interactions with the military and everyone that came into your life as a result of standing for your faith?
Well, I will tell you, I've been talking to Chaplain Mauder and many of you around here, and when you go through something like this, God comes right up to your front door and says hello. You know what I mean? He gets right in your face and lets you know that he's got it. And we had friends call and email, and they would call the house and say, "Hey, I know you must be upset. You must be really freaked out about all this." And I would say, "No, what's going on?" And they'd say, "How can you be so calm?" Well, how can I not be calm when the creator of the world is working in my life, and I can see it so apparently? And so, never more have I been so committed and so close to God at this point. So he has strengthened me, my family, and he has just given me a resolve to take this fight and reclaim religious freedom for our military members.
Next, I'm going to ask Aaron and Melissa Klein to share. They're seated at the end of the table. Aaron and Melissa, no doubt, many of you have heard of their situation, what happened to them, their business, Sweet Cakes by Melissa out in Oregon. They sought to serve the Lord through their business, not separate their faith from their desire to make a living and support their family. Yet, because of this, they drew the ire of a number of activists and those who were opposed to their worldview. They simply sought to live out their faith through their business, serving weddings and creating cakes for those seeking to celebrate a new marriage, but couldn't violate their conscience by supporting a same-sex wedding they knew God did not want them to support. As a result of this, they were sued, and their case has wound its way through the courts. It's now before the Oregon Court of Appeals, and it's one of a number of cases involving wedding vendors in which they're seeking to vindicate their constitutional and statutory rights to religious freedom. These are important cases that are playing out these days, and the stories of these, a lot of them are documented on freetobelieve.com, but the Kleins are at the heart of one of these stories. So we'll see what the legal system has for them, but we want to hear from them personally, hear about their faith and how their faith has been strengthened, regardless of what happens in the courts, which are only ruling against them because of a biased worldview underlying the motivations of many who are playing a part in the system, which their case is winding its way through. They're reaching an end due to a predetermined worldview and using the law to do that. It's very clear, but at the heart of this is spiritual matters. The people in the system who are ruling against their clients worship certain ends. The clients worship God and want to stand for Him. And that's what we want to hear from you all tonight, and just share a little bit about how your faith has been affected through this experience, and why it's important to show your faith through your work and your business, serving those who want to celebrate a marriage.
Well, I would definitely say that for me, it's kind of hard to admit this, but before this all happened, I really struggled with my trust in the Lord. And when this all happened, God completely rocked my world. And He showed up, like Philip said, showed up at my doorstep pretty much. And I saw the hand of God move in my life like I've never seen. And my faith in Him and my trust has just absolutely skyrocketed. And I get a lot of people that will say, I'm so sorry that, you guys are going through this. And all I can do is think to say to people, please don't be sorry, because for me, I've had the most awesome experience of seeing God move in my life. And I wouldn't trade that for the world. And I'd go through this over and over and over again for that. God, to me, is, He's my life. When we opened up our shop, right before we opened, like I said, He was my life and our life and in our family, and we decided we were going to dedicate our shop. We had our pastor come out, and we dedicated our shop, and I wanted everything that I did in my shop to glorify God, because I felt like God gave that to me. He blessed that to me and to us. And, so I just wanted to give everything back to Him. And so we did. We dedicated our shop. And, I get a lot of people, too, that tell us that, you're in business. You can't do business and have your religion, or your faith at your workplace. And to me, I sit there and I say, my religion and my faith is my life. And it's going to go everywhere with me. It's going to go to work. It's going to go to church. It's going to go to the store. It's going to go... I don't leave God on a coffee table at home. He goes everywhere with us. And I'll let you share your part.
For me, the whole idea that the state is going to tell me I have to choose between my faith and making a living to support my family, that's an atrocity. But going through this, I can say this. I hold on to this scripture. Romans chapter 5 says that suffering breeds perseverance, and perseverance, faith, and faith, character, and character, hope. And that hope is the hope we have in Jesus Christ. And that hope has gotten us through this with a smile on our face, because we know that we serve the one true God. And there's no bureaucratic court, there's no court in this nation that will ever take that away from me.
Thanks, guys. We'll get back to you more shortly. For now, I want to get to our last panelist, Matt Schlapp, seated in the middle. Matt is the chairman of the American Conservative Union. He's had a long history here in Washington, D.C. He served with President George W. Bush in his White House. He's worked on Capitol Hill, featured in many news media, and generally had extensive experience here in Washington, D.C. So I'm going to ask Matt to share some of his observations on some of these issues as we develop policy and legal protections for people seeking to live out their faith. We've heard from those who've been affected. Like us at FRC, we want to see how we can protect those going forward so we don't have to face these situations continuing to occur. So, Matt, I'd like to ask you how you see some of these individual religious freedom protections developing in terms of who should be able to support them? Shouldn't people who don't necessarily agree with someone asserting a religious freedom claim be able to say, I support the idea of this person's individual rights. I want them to be protected. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, I'd like to hear more from all of you. I feel unworthy to be sitting up here. But the fact is this. I'm going to say something that's controversial, and I don't mean to be offensive. But I really don't think this is an issue of faith. I'm a person of deep faith. But I think this is about America. No matter what your creed is, no matter what your politics are, America is bigger and better than what we're seeing. We're seeing a system that is based on the Constitution that has run off the tracks. And the strong arm of the federal government, when it gets off those tracks, destroys people's lives. And we heard from the president that you didn't build it, and I guess now he wants to destroy it. But we have to stand up and reorient ourselves and not be pushed back. They're going to tell you that you are intolerant and using your faith in a way that is against the American tradition of the Constitution. And that's just quite simply wrong. And you know that from even your high school civics, that that's wrong. In America, we balance our rights. There are a lot of people in America who have no faith. They have the right to exercise or not exercise the religion they choose. Christians, all of us who are Christians, have the right to express our religion. And things have changed in our culture very quickly. So Travis, not too many years ago, it would have been liberals in Congress and on the bench who would have said, we need religious protection for minority religions, maybe religions we don't even know very much about, because in America we're pluralistic and people have the right to practice these religions. Sometimes those religions included practices that a lot of us thought were not very, that did not comport with our own religious views. But in America, we had to do that. Look how things have changed. You had conservative justices saying, well, I don't know if we need these religious freedom laws. Now, people who profess a faith, the faith that most of our founders professed, the faith that most of the people came to this land to practice, now all of a sudden, we're being told that that is not consistent with the Constitution. And I think it's a dark time, and I think we all have to get educated on these laws. There are bills proposed, Senator Lee's bill in the Senate, and Senator Raul Labrador's in the House, his bill in the House. We all need to get educated, we all need to advocate, but we need to be hopeful, and we need to be tolerant, and we need to be accepting. We need to show them that we are not the ones who are trying to change the very nature of our country. We're actually trying to take our country back and put it back where it needs to be. So I encourage you all to get engaged and to really help in this battle.
Just to follow up real quickly with you before we come back around again, but could you talk a little bit more about maybe who else could we see supporting these types of laws? Who should be in support of the idea of individual rights, of First Amendment rights?
Well, First Amendment rights should be accepted by everybody in this room, and I know they are, and everybody across this land. Matter of fact, if you have a problem with the very First Amendment to the Constitution, I don't know why you want to be in America. It's what makes us so unique. It's what makes us so special. Once again, I don't think it's an issue of faith, Travis. I really don't. I don't think the First Amendment is a Christian amendment. I think the First Amendment is an American amendment. And Christians at our founding were open-minded enough to say, we just want to go to a land where the individual is respected and the individual has rights. And those rights are permanent. And let me just say one other thing about amendments. We all know, because we learned in school, amendments have to go through a process. In order to change the Constitution, you have to go through a democratic process. That democratic process is great for our country. I haven't agreed with every amendment that's been added to the Constitution, but that process engages the American people in a conversation about what their country wants to look like. When 5 justices of the Supreme Court jam a law through the Constitution in an undemocratic way, without the country having that democratic conversation, you can see what happens. It's harsh, it's ugly, and it doesn't get us to the democratic consensus that we need to get to. So I would encourage, once again, all of you, I think this is something that liberals and conservatives and people across faith lines, they need to all link together, and we need to make sure that these religious protections, we shouldn't have to pass this law, but because of what the courts have done, we now need to pass this law, and we need everyone's help to do it.
So to come back around full circle, I'd just like to come back to Casey. And Casey, I'd like for you to comment on something which you did not mention in your opening remarks, but I'd like for you to talk a little bit about what you did in support of Kim Davis quite recently.
Well, Travis, a few days before Ms. Davis went to jail, I woke up about 3 o'clock in the morning, and Lord had impressed on me that I wasn't doing enough for her. I needed to do something for this woman that was about to go to jail. And the thought came that I to get on my bicycle on the most eastern portion of Kentucky and ride it across the state to raise awareness of what was about to happen to this lady. And so I like a lot of us, I guess, I tried to pass that idea off. But I can't do that. I'm too busy. I've got to work. I can't. And the longer I tried to get away from that idea, the bigger it got, and the more real it got, and the more ridiculous it sounded to me not to do it. So I got up on a Thursday morning at 4 o'clock and drove to the easternmost portion of Kentucky and started out. And I told Kim when it was over with, I said Kim, this was something I done completely and totally for you, but I want you to realize that along the way, God has shown me a lot of things that it was as much for me as it was for you. I believe that when we do for others, when we do for others before we do for ourselves, God will always bless us. And there's a thought that came to me along the trip, and I thought about I've got this dog at home that he loves to go on a ride with me, no matter what. He wants to go, and he's never. When I let him go, he never asks me where we're going. He never asks me how long we're going to be gone. He never asks me about the dangers along the way or how he's going to get back home. He just likes to ride with the master. And I believe that we should have that attitude. And instead of telling the Lord to move over and let us drive, we should let Him drive and just be proud to ride with Him.
Mike, I'd like to turn back to you real quick. As we deal with these religious liberty issues in the military, what impact do you think this has on the broader military in terms of morale and issues beyond the simple idea of protecting religious liberty as a principle? Of course, we want to do that, but are we seeing effects in other areas in the military?
Absolutely. I don't think it takes a rocket scientist to realize that what's happening on the religious liberty front in our military really is going to have and will continue to have far-reaching impact beyond just this idea that, well, that's just one service member and their issue. If you look at the historical data in our military, you'll see that people in the military identify as people of faith, of all different types of faiths. We have a very pluralistic and diverse military, and historically, people of faith have comprised about 70 to 75% of our military force. And I say that means they're the backbone of our military, right? And as I've really gotten involved in these issues and seen what's happening, I've had people from across this country come to me or contact me and say, I served in Korea, I served in Vietnam, or I served in Desert Storm, or I served in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I'm now a mother or a father, and I've got kids, and they're patriotic and they want to serve, but I'm telling them no. You know, I don't want my kids to join because I don't like what's happening to our military. And so what we're seeing is there's a lack of people of faith who are willing to raise their right hand and swear an oath of allegiance to the Constitution to support and defend it. They're not joining the military. And you're also seeing people who, at a certain point in their career, just like myself, realize maybe the military really isn't somewhere where I want to spend the next 20 or 25 years. Maybe it's time for me to get out. And you're seeing this void and this vacuum. Well, it's got to be filled by something, right? And as I mentioned, if people of faith form the backbone of our military, they're not joining the military and they're getting out of the military, what does that leave us with? A spineless military. And when we have a spineless military, that weakens our nation. So I truly believe that this battle for religious freedom is really the proverbial canary in the mine shaft, and we start to really have to look at a national security issue, a force protection issue. And I'm not the only one saying this, you know. So I think it's really important that we begin to think about this in terms of the ripple effect, or the chilling effect that Sergeant Monk brought up, that this is going to have across our nation.
Speaking about impact, Sergeant Mock, I'd like to turn to you again and just ask for you to share a little bit more about what happened to you, so folks here understand that and they can see how when someone of faith who's a great service member is, people attempt to force them out of military, this impacts the overall military morale and readiness. I'd like for you just to share from your experience on that.
Sure, and so I returned home from a deployment to my unit to find a new commander who happened to be an open lesbian. And so in my unit, we had a young man that had professed his belief in biblical marriage, and he was to be punished. And when I advised our commander to be level-headed about this, and when we looked at the investigation, there was 47 people that said he did nothing wrong. She was floored that I could not see that giving a biblical account of marriage was not discrimination. And in my head, I just kind of laughed because marriage between a man and a woman, saying man and woman marriage is discrimination. It's not discrimination. That's the truth.
That's right.
And when that was apparent to my commander and she was not okay with my viewpoint, it turned on me and she backed me in a corner. All right, and she wanted to know my views. And I politely told her, I have a religious belief that's not going to allow me to answer the question the way you want me to. In very short order, I found myself in a whole new unit, fired from my position. But you know what? That's okay. Okay? Because what breaks my heart about this, and I was just talking to a serviceman that had come back recently from Afghanistan. You know, we've been fighting overseas for 10 plus years. And he came to me and he was like, man, we've been fighting for a long time. And when we fight over there, we're fighting to preserve the very freedoms in America, so we can preserve the freedoms in America. That's what we're fighting for. Then I come home and I've realized that the real fight for America has been happening right here. And that broke my heart. And I'll tell you what, I'll deploy tomorrow. And I know Chaps is with me here. But if my nation needs me, I'll leave this stage right now and I'll get on a plane and I'll go right overseas. And I don't care if you're black, white, gay, straight, old, or young. I will lay my life down for you in this nation. And that's what men and women in the U.S. military will do. And they absolutely need their faith, their freedom to believe, so that they can operate downrange and protect our freedoms at home. And they need your support because their voices cannot be heard. Chaps is not up here speaking. They need you all to get behind them and speak for them.
So I'd like to turn to the Kleins again, and I'd like to ask you all, you've received a lot of opposition and hate for simply expressing your beliefs and saying we believe that marriage is between a man and a woman. How have you dealt with this, and how have you seen God's love work through you in spite of the opposition you've received?
Through all this, we have seen a lot of opposition. Pure hatred. Things that are threatening. But we take that with a grain of salt because we know that it's coming from a point of misunderstanding. It's coming from an ideal that we are simply hateful because we don't agree. That's not something that this country is built on. Tolerance is supposed to be a two-way street. I don't have to be hostile with them because they don't share my faith and vice versa. We understand, Melissa and I sitting at home, we have children coming up in this world. We see what's going on, and if we were to react in kind, it would not send the right message to our kids. So instead, we lean on God. We lean on the idea that rights walk hand in hand, that if mine fall, so does everybody else's, and we try to get that message out. We've actually gone to the extent where we have sent cakes to some LGBT groups just to say, hey, we love you. This isn't about hate. And we try to send that message out, and we try to make sure that everybody knows that this is about love. This is about us wanting to show the love of Christ, and we have the right to do that. We can hope that the LGBT groups can really understand that we don't hate them, we love them.
We're about to conclude this evening, but I'd like to ask Matt the last question here. In terms of thinking about our neighbors, right? Those who may not automatically agree with us right off the bat in terms of First Amendment religious liberty protections. What do we say to the apathetic person who's our neighbor, maybe our coworker, about why they need to fight for strong, free exercise First Amendment protections for the future of our country?
You know, Travis, when they come for your neighbor and you do nothing, and they come for your friend and you do nothing, and they come for the person you don't like so much and you do nothing. Eventually they come for you. And when government, once again, I view this as a basic constitutional question, and when government feels that it can abridge your First Amendment rights, our First Amendment rights, so willingly, it's hard to recognize America in that. But here's the great thing about our neighbors. America is only as great. This parchment is wonderful. Parchment is great that our rights are written on. But it's us. At the end of the day, the paper is only good as the people it is written for. And our country's not lost. And our neighborhoods aren't lost. And our communities aren't lost. And yes, a president who's out of control can do great damage along with some people in black robes. They can do great damage. But I have great hope that our institution, that our structure can weather this. And I have great hope because of people like up here on this panel and people before us, that we're going to get to a better place on these questions. And we're going to get to a better place on these questions because America has always been great because America is good. And people are still knocking down our door to get into this country, even the people that knock this country, because they know that this is a very special and unique place. So I have great hope, Travis, and I think we're going to navigate away from these things, and it's holding on to our democracy that's going to get us there.
Why don't we thank all our panelists again this evening who shared with us.
If the gravity pulls you down.
Thank you, everyone.